All right, hello and welcome to a new episode of the KewCast, your weekly digest for paddles and all things related to pickleball.
The intro changes
technology.
every week, John.
I'm trying, Eddie. Trying to mix it up a little bit.
Digest. How are you? I haven't seen you for a minute.
Yeah, I smelled like campfire for a good while after getting back from Yellowstone.
How long has it been? 2 weeks?
Well, I was there for like 7 days solid.
Okay.
And they both enjoyed it. You know, it's hard not to enjoy one of the most beautiful spots in the world, you know.
Well, certain teenagers can find a way.
Yeah, Alec is 14 now. It's hard to believe. He's a small 14-year-old, but he did well. He was looking forward mostly to spending time. It was just me and Charlie and Alec, just the boys.
So did they actually disconnect the whole time?
No, you know, I was tempering their internet access.
Right.
But in Yellowstone,
it's hard,
most
right?
you get is like 1 or 2 bars, and it's not a streaming area. So we had 3 solid days in Yellowstone and pretty much a blackout there.
So there was that big explosion that happened like maybe a day before you left?
Yeah.
Did you run into any of that?
No, they closed that area of the park. It's so massive. It takes like 3-4 hours to go from one side of Yellowstone to the other. But I did not see any of that. And my youngest, Charlie, had some anxiety about the super volcano under Yellowstone that it was going to blow up. He's like, it's been 600,000 years since the last one. We're due. But
if it goes, we're all going. It doesn't matter where you are.
That's true. But I was like, Charlie, there's no chance that anything's going to happen. And the day before we left, a big rock explosion. Yeah. Nobody got hurt or nobody died on that. I think some people got pelted with rocks. But, man, it's a wild area. Have you been up to Yellowstone before?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah.
Yeah, just like these boiling cauldrons of mud. And it seems like a different planet in some places. Yeah,
for sure.
But highly recommend it if you haven't been. It's one of those spots that...
Wasn't too crowded?
It was really crowded.
I was going to say, it's high season, right?
High season.
Yeah.
It was mostly Asians and Europeans, and more than Americans, you know, there at this time.
Any pickleball withdrawal symptoms?
No, it's kind of nice to just get away from it for a bit. You know, I always enjoy camping too. It gives you that different mindset and kind of hits the reset button. You go out and you could just like, you know, one of the things about playing pickleball and being in that space is it's so like, it's very sports oriented, but it's not at all nature oriented. Sometimes you get courts in beautiful areas. We have a massive benefit here in Colorado of having the view of the Front Range when we're playing, but you know, it's very much kind of you're there and you're focused on pickleball, and it was good to get back to nature and it's something I've done all my life is camped and hiked and everything.
Awesome.
So that was fun to get back to it.
Great.
Yeah. How was your 2 weeks?
Well, there was a tournament in there, the Rocky Mountain, what's it called? Championship?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Came to town. I think there were 600 or 700 players registered for that. Mm-hmm. Played men's singles. Mm-hmm. Did okay.
Yes.
Took home silver.
That's amazing. 4.0. Silver.
4.0 men's 50 plus.
Yeah.
So it was a tough draw. Everybody was just so talented. I'd never played singles before in any kind of competitive situation. Mm-hmm. So I've been wanting to do this for a while just to see if I should be blaming my partner through all these losses or if I should be looking at myself.
Right. Now, to clarify, it was full court singles, right? Not the skinny singles.
Right.
Stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And so 2 round-robin pools. Mm-hmm. And I came out of my pool 3-0, undefeated. And so that qualified me to get into the gold/silver medal match. So they took the top 1 for that, and then the top 2 from each pool got to play for bronze, which I don't really love as a format. I wish if you came in second, you still had a shot at gold.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
But got into the medal round and took away the first game out of 3. And the rains came. And ended up sitting around for about 2 hours, I think, and I didn't take very good care of myself during that 2 hours. I just kind of sat around and lounged and talked to people. And, you know, I should have probably been snacking and stretching and walking or just to stay loose. But I got really tight. And David, my competitor, he played really well, played smart, and ended up taking the last 2 games. So,
well, silver ain't bad, especially your first singles tournament. And every time I've played singles, which is not very often, it's been a couple of years since I even played in a tournament singles, but I'm always amazed at how good singles players are and how how almost it's a different sport than doubles, you know.
It definitely is.
Yeah, and I get schooled every time. I always thought singles was my thing when I started pickleball, and then I realized, it's not my thing.
I don't know, man. If I had your arm length and your height, things could have been different.
Yeah, but that's really, really good. And don't be fooled. The 50-plus division is full of crafty players. Like these guys, even though they look old, the guys that play singles in the 50-plus are really good at singles, and they can pass you on a dime, man. They're so accurate with their passing shots.
I think the 50-plus group was one of the more populated brackets, too.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It was fun, though. I want to do it again. I need to be in, A, better shape, and B, work on the accuracy of my ground strokes. For a while, I was getting to balls, but only really returning right at my opponent.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I ended up losing those 2 games. Is I just couldn't move the ball. I could get to the ball, but I just couldn't. I couldn't angle it where I wanted it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But good stuff.
Good stuff.
Congratulations to David.
Yes. And to you. All right.
Thanks.
Well, moving on, we've got a new segment, Eddie, and you and I sometimes struggle a bit when we're recapping pro events. You know, it's not our main focus for this podcast. It's more gear-related content, but we do like to occasionally cover pro events. But I brought in somebody to help this time, and hopefully it'll be a recurring segment. So Chris Cali agreed to come on the podcast.
All right. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. And,
nice.
He's the man when it comes to
he's the best.
Recapping pro events, to pro tournaments, the pro tour. And I've been out of the loop now for the past 3 weeks with MLP and Olympics and trying to finish some things at home. And instead of trying to get caught up and going back and watching days and days of tape, Chris is going to come on and the podcast.
That is so cool.
All right, so we have a new segment this week. I am very happy to say that Chris Cali from Sorry Not Sorry is joining the KewCast this week for a segment. And Chris, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't keep up with as much of the Pro Tour as you, and Eddie doesn't either. So we've kind of struggled. Sometimes we cover some highlights on the Pro Tours as a segment in our podcast. Other times we don't at all. But on the times that I don't really watch enough, I just go to your show and I'm like, I'm going to watch Chris Cali, talk about these, and it's entertaining. By the way, most of you, I'm sure most of our listeners know Sorry Not Sorry, but if not, go check them out. Really good recaps of PPA, APP, and MLP.
Oh, man. Well, appreciate the kind words. And super pumped to be here. I think this is going to be fun. Us kind of recapping some things and getting each other's perspective on all this. So, yeah, I'm excited, man.
Do this. So the goal of this segment is just to do like a 10-minute pro recap and, choose some gems that you usually cover. Sorry, not sorry. And we can just chat about some things. So, like I said, I'm more of a PPA fan than an MLP fan. And with the Olympics going on, and I've had some travel, you've had some travel as well. This is not going to be our most prepared segment. But moving forward, the goal is, to do this weekly. But I have not watched consistently the last 3 MLPs. I've seen some highlights, tuning into Instagram and seeing those things. But yeah, I mean, there are some definitely big things that have happened, some fun things that I'd love to talk about. But looks like, in terms of the rankings of the teams, right now the St. Louis Shock is number 1. Is that kind of where you're at with MLP?
Yeah, I mean, clearly they're definitely the top dog. I mean, it's going to be interesting going down the stretch because if you look at the standings right now, first off, you have to measure the standings based off of points per game. I can't stand it when they show on the broadcast, they're like, this team has the most points and this team has way less points. It's like, yeah, well, they're playing a different amount of games. So, that's just not going to work for a measurement. Shout out to Real Clear Stats. So if anybody's a super nerd with trying to figure this stuff out, go check out the Instagram page for Real Clear Stats. He sorts all the teams by their points per game. And you can see that the top dogs, right now we have the top 6 teams are all clearly defined. It's like the gap from the top 6 to the bottom 6, it's a huge gap there. So we pretty much know who's going to make it to the playoffs. But now it's kind of a battle for who's going to land in those top 2 spots, because those top 2 spots are the teams that get a bye. And a bye is a huge advantage right now, because when you have the bye, you get to choose, what side you're playing on. You get to react to the teams that come out. You get to choose if you want to serve or return. So there's like a whole bunch of advantages that come into play when you have, the higher seed on top of the fact that you get a bye. So you literally don't have to play, a round of the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting because, the Shock seem like they're the top team, but the Dallas Flash are right there, and now the Texas Rangers have been on a hot streak. I mean, they have won 7 straight games until they lost their first one this weekend. So the top 3 teams right now, I mean, they're all fairly close. If I'm betting my life savings on it, I think I got to go with the Shock, though. So I would agree that they're looking like the top dog right now.
New Jersey Fives are up there too, right?
For sure, yeah. I believe that they're in 4th place right now based off of points per match. But here's the thing. New Jersey Fives, they've played the least amount of games, like, compared to every other team. They have more games than anybody else still left to play. So they're in a really good position to potentially even be the top team because they have the biggest, opportunity in front of them. Right. I think, if you look at like who's got the advantage here, I think it's the team that has more games to play. I'd be a little bit scared if I'm right now the top 3 teams. You know what? Let me actually pull it up because I do want to get this right. But the top 3 teams right now are all the teams that have played the most games. So it's like there's kind of a correlation there, where it's like maybe the more experience you get with playing certain teams, the more you're kind of climbing up. So number 1 right now is the St. Louis Shock. They're at 2.11 points per match. Dallas Flash, 2.06 points per match. Texas Rangers at 1.94 points per match. And New Jersey's right behind them, 1.89. So they still have 14 games to play. Yeah, so it's real clear stats. New Jersey has 14 games to play compared to 5 games to play for the Shock, the Flash, and the Ranchers. So, I mean, that's just like a crazy difference in the amount of games you got to play. So, would not be surprised if the New Jersey Fives end up being one of the top 2 teams. Yeah.
They're all killing it. John's brothers, on the other hand, they're not. They're struggling in MLP. Yeah, so the Carolina Pickleball Club, which has Ben and Collin, I think they're ranked number 8. What does Real Clear Stats rank them as?
Yeah, number 8 as well. They have 1.09 points per match. Just 0.01 better than the Orlando Squeeze right now. So really, wow. I mean, they're almost like the 9th spot too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I read some statistics. I heard them, jotted them down, but Ben is winning 63% of MLP games he's playing in versus like Annalie Waters at 88%. And Anna Bright, she's up there too. I think she's 70-something%. So yeah, it's Ben's not doing Ben things right now. It's just not the right format, I think, for Ben and Collin. It's all about chemistry in MLP.
Well, I don't know if I'll buy the argument that Ben is not in the right format because he has done well in MLP in the past. And he's done well with debatably not a very good team. I mean, he's even had some of these players before. He's had Jesse Irvin on his team.
And did a lot better before, right?
Yeah, for sure. I gotta say, honestly, I feel like it's Collin. I don't know. Collin seems like the common denominator for teams that don't do so hot in MLP. And, as I'm sure most people by now, if you're tapped into the pro pickleball world, you saw Collin is not very happy with MLP. He's, let's just say, not a fan of the format, of the whole process. And, I mean, I don't know if that's, it's like chicken or the egg. Is that because he's not doing well, or is that why he's not doing well? But, yeah, I don't know if I blame it on Ben not being, kind of the right type of player for MLP. I will say it does seem like having more of a larger presence kind of emotionally seems to be the common denominator for teams that do have success. You look at Anna Bright, you look at Julian Arnold in the past, you look at, who's someone else? Zane, exactly. A great example. Zane is actually playing, he's on the bottom tier of players this year, but the Fives are crushing it. And you just watch, and it kind of just passes this eye test of like, yeah, I think Zane is helping them more than he's hurting him, even though the stats would tell you that he's not doing so well. And honestly, it just seems like an outlier because he has done great in the past in MLP. He's won, I think, if he's not the top 2 or 3, he's in the top 5 as far as the most championships for MLP of all time, which obviously has only been around for a few years, but still, that's very telling that the players who have this like kind of energy about them tend to be more successful. And then, Ben Johns did win I believe it was the super final that he won last year, if I'm right. So, which was kind of a weird format in and of itself, but yeah. So I don't know. I don't think Ben is a problem. I think it's Collin.
Yeah, and he mentioned his kind of leaked rant. Eddie and I just covered that in a podcast, so we don't have to get too much into it. But yeah, he's not a fan of MLP for sure. All right, well, Chris, let's get into kind of your bread and butter here and get over to some of your favorite moments, games, and points from whatever MLP you want to talk about. So what do you got for us?
Well, I think if we want to start with, what was it, Grand Rapids, I think the craziest thing, even though, it didn't have too much significance, but it was kind of fun to see, was Jay DeVilliers trying to absolutely destroy James Ignatowicz with the body bag, which I love that. I love seeing somebody who's just going to like really go for it, because that is a strategy, right? Like just trying to bag somebody, yeah, it's going to go out of bounds, but if you hit it quick enough, it's going to hit them. But the fun part is if you fast forward then to Salt Lake City, Annalie Waters gets him back. So I just thought that whole exchange between the two different events there were some fun highlights to see. It kind of seemed to have a lot of buzz on social media too. People really liked seeing that type of stuff happen. Yeah, man. Jay's attempted body bag at James Ignatowicz was insane. Like he wound up, he's a big guy too, and he hit the ball as hard as he can hit a pickleball. And it kind of skipped off the net and missed James. And James took it well. He kind of smiled and laughed about it. But man, that would have been a brutal body bag. It would have left a mark for sure. Oh yeah. I kind of wanted to see what would happen if it did hit him, but unfortunately, Jeez. It didn't happen. Yeah. And then Annalie, I think Jay lobbed her and she ran back and got it, and then he dropped it, and she just kept running, threw the ball, and just beamed him almost as hard as you can hit a pickleball. The best part of that was watching everybody on the sideline just react to it. They're like, oh my gosh, like, please don't fight. It was like, what are you going to do to this underage, like, little girl? Are you going to yell at her? And he just kind of took it. He's like, all right, hey, I've tried to do that to people too. Yeah. Yeah, he didn't have a moral high ground after he tried the same thing with James. But wow, that was crazy. Yeah, her mom's face afterwards was just like, what in the world did you just do? Yeah, because it's hard, because it's like you want to, I don't know, imagine if you're on the team, you could kind of see Zane's face where he was like happy, but he's like, I can't really cheer for that because I'm going to seem like a jerk. If I was on the sideline, I would totally be cheering. I would be like, yes, great job, you did it, But from what I heard, the whole crowd got really quiet after that. It was I could hear a pin drop. Yeah, like, is he gonna be mad? Yeah, it seems like things are getting more vicious. It's bound to happen as there's more money on the line and people are making careers out of it. Tempers flare, and certainly we've all had the impulse, like somebody's breathing down our throat and being really aggressive, but to actually follow through with it. I would not condone this at the amateur level though, like as hard as you can swing, because somebody's going to put out an eye, because nobody is that accurate. Pros are more accurate. I think you have a different perspective, Chris. I don't know. Context matters. If it's like a tight game, I don't know. I think you got, if it's somebody who's good, I think you go for it. If you're beating up on people who are a little bit lower level, that's when it doesn't feel good at all. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a serial killer and I have no empathy, but I'm like that I would feel a little bit happy with myself. Like, yeah, I got him. Although if you're friendly, it's a little tougher. But maybe if you like make me mad or something, I don't know. Maybe I'll just convince myself that you're a jerk and you're a bad person. Just try to imagine you hurting dogs or something like that. Yeah, I'm just, I was playing yesterday. I got hit in the face 3 times with this group of people. And I was like, man, once, like, I get it like an errant ball occasionally,
but 3 times, and just like, you should learn to aim before you speed up the ball. And if somebody's going to take a swing as big as Jay, they better be 100% sure that ball's not going to be above the neck, or even Annalise running hit. But anyway, that's an aside. But so Hayden got Nasty Nelson by Zane also.
Yes, he did. That was insane to watch too. And that, man, I mean, it was already kind of a blowout. So I love that he just went for it. But yeah, that was pretty awesome to see, like, a Nasty Nelson happen in any type of pro game. I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but yeah, I feel like Zane is the only one that would ever really try that, to be honest.
Yeah. There was a perfect serve too. I mean, I guess it skipped off the net, so a little bit of luck on Zane's part.
That almost worked better. Yeah,
was incredible.
Yeah, it makes me want to try it. Like, after I saw that, I was like, I want to try and pull that off. And I honestly got too scared in the middle of a game to try it. I was like, I don't know, I'm not accurate enough. I'm gonna, like, so embarrassing if you miss that. It's like, which I've done before. I've missed that on a friend one time while we were playing, and everyone just looked like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, nothing. I tried to just, like, move on as quickly as possible, and it just didn't work.
It's actually pretty hard to Nasty Nelson
so
somebody.
hard. Yeah. When I practice on the wall, I like practice as if I'm trying to Nasty Nelson. I'm like, all right, if I'm serving, there's my target, Nasty Nelson.
All right. Any other notable moments, games, points?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this last weekend, we did see Jay DeVilliers make the top 10. He made number 5 on SportsCenter with honestly a really sick play. It was an overhead that got slammed, and he, like, just somehow naturally reacted to hit a tweener, and not only hit a tweener back, like, and landed in, it landed, like, right on the line for a winner. It was like the craziest shot ever. It was super impressive. I mean, I want to know what else was on SportsCenter top 10, because I'm like, that deserves at least like a number 3 or 2 spot. You're telling me that there was 4 other plays that were better than that? I mean, that's a little hard to believe.
That's one of the plays I actually did see when I was watching MLP, just scanning around. And at first I didn't know what happened. Like, it was such a hard overhead, and he got it back, and I was like, that's an amazing reset. And I had no idea it was a tweener until they replayed it and slowed it down. I was like, what? How in the world did he do that?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see it on the, like, when you're watching live, it, like, was kind of off camera. You're like, oh, that, you just looked like he was backpedaling, and then they played the replay. You're like, what? Like, my thing is always like, I don't get why the reaction is to go tweener. It's super cool, and is it like necessary? Which, whatever. I don't care if it was necessary, but I'm like, should I be doing that more myself? Maybe he really did need to do it like that.
Yeah, it just got behind him a little bit and coming right between his legs. He was like, all right, I'm going to go for it.
So cool.
Versus Alshon, who's very much showboating it.
He'll just, like, you tweener a dink. Yeah, and you're like, what are you doing? Yeah.
Right. All right, man. Well, we're over 30 minutes. We got some work to do to figure out how to get this down to 10 minutes.
I ramble.
I do too. So, Chris, it's been fantastic chatting with you, catching up. And, I love it that you're willing to come on and fill us in on some of the pro recap.
Definitely. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to doing this more often. And yeah, man. You said that you're more of a fan of the PPA. My goal by the end of this is I'm going to make you more of a fan of MLP. That's my goal right now.
Right. So. All right, good, sir. Well, thanks so much, man. And
thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing your Sorry Not Sorry this week. Is it come out tomorrow?
Baby. It's going to come out on Thursday or Friday. I don't know.
Okay.
Depends how quick I could record. Because as you can see, I talk a lot about this stuff.
All right, man. Good to see you, Chris.
You too, man.
See you next time. Well, shall we jump back into it?
Yeah, gear gossip.
Let's go to gear gossip. So, a bit of news real quick. So, the Core Shapeshifter, after selling out really quickly on their first release, or after I reviewed it, is now back open for pre-order, and the paddles will be shipping in 2 weeks. And it went back up for pre-order just a couple days ago, and they already went through about half of their stock. So it's pretty, I mean, they're not at the levels that like 6.0 are. So there's a few hundred paddles, so not thousands. So I think the black are sold out, but there's new colorways, which Matt is sending us. Matt, the owner of Chorus.
Are we allowed to show pictures of those?
Yeah, I'll
'Cause
put
they
those in
look
the B-roll.
really good.
They do look really good.
look
So
amazing.
there's a white one and an orange one. So white trim and orange trim.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to try that orange one. I have the matching slice cap already.
Really? Because
for
I like
that.
the white one.
Do you like the white one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think the orange is both the white and the orange are still in stock, but they will probably go fast. So if you are interested in the Shapeshifter and to get a chance on the first run, then they are.
We've been big
Back in
into
stock.
these shapeshifters for months now.
Yeah. It's still my main.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I hear the orange one plays way better.
Absolutely. All right. So moving on there, everybody's talking about this now, but the whole Collin Johns MLP rant.
Oh, yeah.
I think I first saw Memes of Pickleball show it, and then I kind of dug around and found the Reddit thread. This was last week, and Collin ended up making an official statement because nobody knew whether or not this was real, although it seemed like things Collin might say. But so before we get into kind of what the leaked documents said, let's get into what Collin replied to and officially stated about the document. So, I think it's important to say that because this document is cobbled together from a series of conversations and texts that he had with unknown people. So it's not like he submitted this as an official statement. Somebody pulled these together and then leaked it to the public. So not very cool to Collin Johns, but
No, that's not cool at all. Regardless of what was said, it was said in confidence. And some degree of privacy, hopefully.
Sure. Yeah, he basically said that the list of grievances allegedly written by me and currently being shared is based on a number of texts that were privately shared in casual conversation. So, he said allegedly, but he's also fessing up to, yes, these things are from me. It's just somebody pulled them together. So you get a chance to read the leaked document. Do you have any takeaway points or agreements, disagreements?
I think I'm like most. I agree with some. I disagree with others. If you're to take them at word and face value, right? Because obviously if he were to write something for an article or a direct communication to MLP, he probably would have phrased some things differently. But yeah, I agree with some things. I disagree with others.
Yeah.
How about you?
Same. We can kind of go through some of the main points. So his first point was that the top players in the world, especially Ben, his brother, is handicapped based on the draw because he is being the number one ranked player. People choose him first, and then they get lower tier players to team up with to kind of balance out the duper, which is the way it's designed. Which I think that's probably fair for MLP. We wouldn't want 4 people, all top tier, the top 4 players in the world together on the same team, and they
That
just
has
make a
zero
run for it.
entertainment value.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, you could say PPA is like that too, but
Right.
and that's kind of what we want to avoid.
Yeah, for sure.
Is number 1 and number 2 being teamed up.
Right. So I would disagree with Collin there. He did say that the scoring system is flawed. He doesn't like the freeze in particular. So it's rally scoring at MLP, and then there's a freeze. And they've tweaked that formula a little bit, but he's saying basically that the scoring system allows inferior players to keep the scoreline close and then steal matches based on that freeze. So once you reach 24, is it now? And then it goes up to 25 now. So if once you reach 24, it freezes, you have to win on your serve instead of being rally. And that allows people to come back. And that's a design of MLP that I also think is valid. It wouldn't be as fun if it was so lopsided. And I think that freeze does help the entertainment value of the game as well.
I think that's what a lot of this boils down to is what kind of event is it that MLP is designing and who is it for? Is it for the benefit of players? Probably yes, but not as a primary.
Right.
Primarily, it's for audience interest and participation. The way you get that is by making these exciting matches.
Right. I think Real Clear Stats did run the numbers and looked at, okay, what would happen if the freeze wasn't there? And it didn't make that much of a difference, if I remember correctly. This came out last year at some point. But, it does seem that the matches are closer, which does make it more exciting. But there are still lopsided matches. And in fact, Ben and Collin haven't been doing well in MLP this year. They're down a lot. Their whole team is. And, they've lost some matches while they were playing, 25-16, 25-14, 25-12.
I don't think the scoring system would have made a damn bit of difference.
Well, yeah. So if, it goes both ways. If he's saying that inferior players, have a leg up, then, they've lost with some pretty big differentials as well. He also said that it even though it's portrayed as a team event, a team effort, but he said that the results clearly hinge on certain matches where you personally have no control over the outcome. Here's where it sounds a bit whiny. He said that Ben and I could have won every single one of our matches, but with our women going 0-9 in all caps to start the season, then they were at a disadvantage. But yeah, I mean, that's part of it too. So far, we're not really teaming up with. He had a couple of valid points in here. I'm sure. I think so. The next one was singles. He didn't like the Dream Breaker. He says that it might be exciting, but it's not the focus of many top players. I think it's nice to see. I mean, it seems a bit gimmicky at times. The Dream Breaker thing, it's just like, oh, is a man going to go against a woman?
But again, some of the more exciting moments in MLP are the Dream Breakers.
Yeah, for sure. Seeing the women get points on men, it's a lot of fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so we're 0-4?
0-4. Next one. Players, owners, GMs, and fans are permitted to behave in the worst ways at MLP. It's part of the culture. You can scream, stare down, finger wag, taunt, cheat, and use pretty much any Bush League tactics you want with very little risk of repercussions. It's an accepted part of MLP, and he hates that. I'm there with him on that. I'm halfway there with him on that. I do like a rowdier culture at MLP, and I like to see some of the chattering and trash talking, as long as it's all good natured. But it often crosses that line at MLP.
It does too often, and I will agree wholeheartedly with Collin on this one.
Yeah.
In that I appreciate enthusiasm and the cheering for one's own team. Mm-hmm. Where I kind of draw the line is the in your face,
right,
with the other team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I get it. But you mentioned the Olympics earlier, and what I love about the Olympics is that you see sportsmanship on display in every event, every day. You see some examples of bad sportsmanship, and frankly, it's the kind of stuff that we see at MLP that
right.
In an Olympics forum, it's not tolerable. Mm-hmm. And so, I think there's something to that we want to see the best of people on display, and that means a certain degree of positivity and sportsmanship.
Sure. Yeah, well said. I'm trying to be more fair because, in my opinion, I don't like it at all when people trash talk me in the court. But, good-natured trash talk. It's fun between friends. But too often in competitive situations, people try to get in your head. And I totally realize that's part of the game. And at the competitive level, it's going to happen. Everybody's trying to get in each other's head. But, I think Colin's a little more sensitive, as I am, even though it's not my profession. I'm not a pro pickleball player, but I don't like it. He doesn't like it either. But at the same time,
do you think it adds to the entertainment value?
Like I said, if it's in good nature, I think Hayden Patrick's fun to watch. He gets very lippy and chatty, but I see also him smiling while he's doing it because he's having fun, and I don't often think he crosses too much of a line. Sometimes he gets the flags, the cards for cursing and saying nasty stuff to the other team. But for the most part, I think he walks that line intelligently. Then there are other players that not so much. I get frustrated seeing them. I will say, though, however, that the more it was a real turnoff last year to see some people play the Johns brothers and get really, really lippy with the Johns brothers. Mm-hmm. And you could hear some of the comments. I was like, that's really tacky. It's so, it's not in good taste. As I get to know these players better, or at least not personally, but see more of their play and see how they act on and off court, I'm becoming more tolerant of the trash talk because, some of them can give it and take it. But if it crosses the line, if it gets personal, if they're calling out, family members and stuff like that, it's just got to stop. But I do agree with you that it's nice to see something classier like the Olympics. I don't necessarily think that all pickleball venues should be as high tier and as classy as the Olympics. I think there's room in pickleball for a little bit of a rowdier place like MLP, but I do think it crosses the line too much in MLP.
There's definitely people that when they're playing, I'm just going to actively turn it off because I'm not interested in seeing their brand of trash talk.
Yeah, for sure.
On the other end of the spectrum, I think players like Jack Sock are really the benchmark for the kind of chatter you might find acceptable and actually quite pleasing. I think he does a great job of being self-effacing. He's quick to cheer others on. I like watching him because of the way his demeanor on court.
Really good point about Jack Sock. I didn't think of him, but he rocks that line really well. Or being able to play the mental game, get into people's head, but doing it in a classier way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So 4-1.
4-1. Okay, next one. I'm not going through all these. I just cherry picked some. The venue selection is grossly unprofessional. The pickler literally put undiffused lighting directly down the middle of the courts. That was in Salt Lake City 2 MLPs ago. I mean, yeah, I get the undiffused lighting issue. It looked nice on TV. It was all black walls, so at least they didn't have light-colored walls. But if the lighting is not great, there is a big difference. So I've been to a few places now where they have the lights inverted and you get diffusion from the ceiling, and it's night and day difference when you're playing pickleball versus the
Direct downward.
direct down, these bright LEDs. If you look up, you get blinded. So yeah, valid point. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, indoor pickleball is still kind of an evolving thing, right?
Yeah.
There's few places that have the perfect recipe. We've got a few decent places around here, but even there, lightning can be not lightning. Lightning's a problem, but so is lighting. But I agree with you. I've seen some pictures. There's this new club in Miami, I think, that has a lot of sort of upward lighting. So much better. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, makes a big
And
difference.
fully diffused as well. So yeah, I get that. I wouldn't necessarily call it out in this manner because I mean, these businesses are trying as hard as anybody to try and make a good experience for everybody. I don't think that's quite fair, but
Good
I
point.
get it.
All right, next one. MLP just signed a ball contract with Vulcan. Agree. I mean, yeah, he's basically saying, if the ball's not it doesn't have a consistent bounce, we can't look and act professional. We can't be professional athletes with a ball that doesn't work.
Yeah, when the serve comes and the ball rolls,
Yeah.
when it's supposed to bounce,
Yeah.
that really doesn't give anybody a fair shake.
No. And version 1, Gen 1 Vulcan definitely had really bad issues. Gen 2 doesn't seem to be much better, but I'm saving my judgment on that until I have more playtime with it. All right. And then lastly, paddle testing in DC was an unmitigated disaster. This general issue is as much a problem at PPA, so it isn't just relegated, I think is what he meant, it says regulated, to just MLP. I agree. So in DC, I think they just basically stopped testing paddles because they couldn't figure it out. I'm glad that I'm sure this was not meant for the public, but he said it's also a problem with the PPA. There's a balancing act right now between the regulatory agencies or USAP. Now that UPAA is getting into the fray, and what they can actually do on site at a pickleball tournament. It's difficult, and right now it's deflection and the stare at roughness testing. Will they get to a point where they're going to have better tools? Absolutely, but until USAP and or UPAA can agree on what exit velocity is and can we test it on site, then we're stuck with what we have.
Yeah, this is really a half point to Collin on this one. Yeah, it's a problem, but it's a work in progress.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So where are we at?
I think we're at 4 to 2.5.
4 to 2.5. Okay, 2.5 yay and 4 nay. Okay, juicy stuff. I think it's kind of nice to peek behind the curtains and see what Collin thinks about things. Yes, it's not fair that somebody, pulled this together and leaked it to the public. And I've had one interaction with Collin face to face. Interviewed him at the JOOLA event, and he seems I realize I don't have a lot of experience with him, but he seemed perfectly likable.
At the very least, this makes for a great thought exercise.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a deep thinker, which I appreciate. Very smart guy. Okay, Eddie, let's move on.
Speaking of which, I thought I saw somewhere in the comments where, Ben's the number one player in the world, but how does that translate to him as a team leader?
True.
Which is a really interesting point because MLPs, obviously it's a team event. So does he have what it takes to bring along others and not just himself?
Really good point. I mean, MLP, one of the things I love about it is it's all about the chemistry of the team.
Exactly.
And it's a big deal in pickleball. We've all had partners we can't play a good point with, and we've had partners that lift us up. We lift each other up, and something about the chemistry with other people is huge in pickleball, and that's amplified by 4 at MLP with the larger team, right? And the Johns brothers are Ben in particular is very almost Spartan in his approach on the bench. Robotic. He never really discusses, especially at the PPA when it's just him and his brother. Or him and Anna Lee. They go sit on the bench. You can tell Anna Lee wants to talk. Ben's just... and the one time he did talk, there was a hot mic.
Oops.
So now he's like, I'm never talking again.
Right.
But yeah, that's just his personality, and it probably doesn't translate well to being a team lead.
Yeah.
Versus Anna Bright, who's far and away the best team lead in MLP. She brings on the best talent. She gets her team hyped up. She's clearly really good at being the team lead.
Yep. Good points.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. So this week, Eddie, moving on to the paddles of the week. This week we've tested the PaddleTek paddles, which I've had now for a few weeks, and I ran the metrics on them early, put them up on my database. All of the metrics on all of these PaddleTeks is extremely high pop, extremely high power, and the firepower on all these is
feel that
super top tier. A really good spin on all these as well. But there are some variances within the firepower and other metrics that we can flesh out here.
Yeah. These are the first PaddleTeks I've touched in about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I played with the Tempest Wave. I think it was the original one, which at the time was probably a class-leading paddle. And a friend of mine pretty much stole it from me. No, he bought it from me, but for a
reduced price.
Not even an increased price because he wanted it like that day.
Oh, okay.
So it was a great paddle for the time, but I had not seen a whole lot of innovation from PaddleTek for years and years. So these are maybe not cutting edge in terms of technology, but in terms of performance,
Yeah,
they're pretty good.
These are good examples of kind of the whole is greater than some of their parts because they're not thermoform, they're Gen 1 paddles, but every component that they've put on these new batch of paddles, newer batches of paddles, works together to create a really solid performance paddle. And they really have burst back on the scene this year as a top competitor. I
would say so.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move into each paddle. And
where do you want to start?
Have hit with them. Why don't we go to Bantam TKO CX.
CX.
Yep. This one is, I love it that they go decimals on their thickness. This is 14.3 millimeter core thickness.
Very precise.
Yes. So on the thinner side for cores, which that's their thickest core, by the way. They don't go up to 16. Their others are 12.7. So back to the TKO CX, 14.3 millimeter. Eddie, what are your thoughts on this, how it played?
It's not really specific to this particular paddle, but I've always had a problem with these Gen 1 grips. That soft spot and this flat side right here.
Okay.
Don't love it, but I do like the longer handle of this one. This is a really powerful paddle. I was getting some good rips on this. And the dwell time on the ball feels really good too. Good control. Solid power. Solid everything really with this paddle. The only downside are this grip and the swing weight. It's a very slow paddle.
Right.
For me at 120-ish swing weight. How about you?
Yeah, the handle's a little thicker. Yeah, it is a little squishy. You can feel the ridges in the paddle. It feels like
it's better, but it's not.
It's not exposed polymer, I can tell that. It feels like they put something over the polymer. I don't know if it's a little plastic sheet or maybe something less sturdy than plastic. You can actually feel the crunching. Yeah. No, I didn't notice it, but now that you said it, certainly an issue. You're dead on the power and the pop on this. The spin's great. It's really top tier. So I did run the metrics on this, and I think it's like above 2,200 RPM. All these are.
I would guess so.
Close to 2,300, which is like top of the top tier, which is great because PaddleTek doesn't use crazy grit. You can feel it, and it feels average, I'd say, for a raw carbon fiber surface. But whatever they're doing gets really great spin. Yeah, similar to Engage, and I would compare a lot of these to Engage's paddles in the sense of like the dwell time and made in USA, and just these components are playing a little similar between PaddleTek and Engage to me.
It's interesting. We just out of coincidence, I was playing with the Gearbox, the Ultimate, today, and the dwell time felt very similar. They both seem to sit on that face a long time. Neither one has a lot of grip, but they both feel like they're getting a ton of spin from that dwell time.
I didn't get as much spin on the Gearbox Ultimate. That was one of the things they wanted to improve. Mine was still around 2,000. Maybe it's different form and technique. You might be getting more dwell time than me on your top spin, but these were getting a lot more spin to me than the Gearbox Ultimate.
I'll tell you what, though, if I had this at that singles tournament,
this would be a good singles battle.
It would be awesome.
Yeah. Now the downfall on this one to me, like I said, I did notice the handle. That is an issue if that's a sticking point for you. But what I didn't like about this paddle is the narrow sweet spot. And they don't use edge foam in their paddles. They are Gen 1. I think all of these would be improved with edge foam, but this being an elongated paddle, it makes it more narrow, and I felt like the sweet spot wasn't the greatest on this. That my trying to get through the transition zone, this paddle didn't serve me very well for that.
I found the sweet spot to be a bigger problem with the paddle we'll talk about in a little bit. This one is definitely sort of on the narrower side than the TKOC that we're going to talk about next.
Right.
But it wasn't too problematic for me.
It did benefit. You can see I have some sticky stuff on here, some residue from the tungsten tape I put on it. I put tungsten tape from just above the grip, maybe an inch above the grip, up to almost halfway up the sides. That was the 1 gram per inch. And it shored up some of the issues I was having with not only the sweet spot, it broadened out the sweet spot, but also just the general twistiness of it when you hit off center. So that did help, as it does with every paddle with a narrow sweet spot. Not a control paddle. All power, I'd say, for this one. The dwell time, that did feel nice at the kitchen, but a lot of pop-ups at the kitchen as well.
Okay.
Really poppy paddle. And yeah, I was not able to, and the 2 games I had with it, not able to dial in that pop. Now, clearly you can adjust, but it's never going to be, this configuration is never going to be a control paddle. This is very much on the power spectrum.
Speaking of poppy, all 4 of these paddles are loud.
I love the sound of it. Even though it is kind of obnoxiously loud.
It's a deeper sound.
It's a deeper thud, and it feels good when you hit the ball. We're dead center with this. It's just
it sounds good, but man, it rings in your ears for a bit if you really strike it well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the other one, TKOC.
TKOC.
It's a shorter handle and a thinner paddle. Eddie, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I felt like the sweet spot was a little bit broader on this one. Possibly taller because of the shorter handle. That makes sense, right? Also powerful, but for me, easier to swing. I feel like this is a little less of a hammer and more of a control-oriented version of what we just talked about.
Moving the needle a little bit toward the control.
Absolutely. Maneuverability for sure.
Yeah, agree with that. Of the 2, I'd probably prefer this one. It's still a long enough handle where you can get 2 hands on it, but the added sweet spot, and like you said, I think most of the sweet spot increase is going up and down.
Vertical.
It's still not a wide sweet spot, but that little bit did help through the transition zone. I felt a little more confident, which is ironic because this is a thinner paddle, and usually thinner paddles are not more control oriented. But this one worked. It's still classified as solidly in the power category of the side of the spectrum, but yeah, moving back to the control a little bit. The power on this one was less than the CX, but the pop was greater on the thinner one, on the TKOC. So that did also translate to making it hard to control at the kitchen. It's not as plush a feel as the thicker one. It didn't get as much dwell time, so you're losing some of that, and you're gaining some pop.
Yeah.
So pop-ups were an issue for me at the kitchen. Like I said, though, the there are some control benefits to this going through the transition zone because of the larger sweet spot.
So we've talked about power. We've talked about pop and the TKOC. Next is, what do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, let's go Tempest TKOC. And that's their elongated. Tempest. Now, the Tempest, so the Bantam is advertised as their power series, Tempest their control series. Just FYI. So what do you think of the Tempest TKOC?
Another hammer.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like if you're going to play with a hammer, have it be powerful. In which case I would have picked the other one, the TKO CX.
Okay.
CK? No, CX, right? So this one, a little bit more control-oriented, I would say. But I don't know, even a smaller sweet spot, in my opinion. I was having a tough time really dialing this one in.
Same.
Okay.
Except for I got plenty of power and pop with this, almost as much. Like if you blindfold me, I don't think I could tell the difference in terms of power and pop between this and the TKO, the Bantam. But dead on with the comment about the sweet spot being smaller. I could not get this dialed in. It was either dying on me or being popped up.
The way I think it makes sense to me in my mind is that in these Bantams, there's power, and there's power kind of consistently throughout. Mm-hmm. With this, it's kind of like an increasing power curve the higher you go up on the face, and that makes it really hard to be consistent.
What do you mean? So that like power's increasing as you go this way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I didn't notice that. And play with it a little more to see if I can find that. Same as you did, but yeah, it seemed far more inconsistent. More inconsistent.
Probably my least favorite of the four.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
Going to the other side of the spectrum in terms of my most favorite of the four.
Okay. So now we're
This
on.
is kind of a throwback shape. You know, this is kind of a reminiscent of the original Tempest wave that I played with 4 years ago.
Yep.
Kind of on the retro side of paddle shapes, but
Yeah.
it works.
Hey, you know, white is the new gray, right? So white's the new black. So this one is a wider body paddle, shorter handle, shorter overall length. But sorry, by the way, this is the Tempest Wave Pro C, 14.3 millimeter. Yeah, I'd say that this one was a noticeable decrease in power, for sure. From the baseline, it's not hitting balls as hard with full swings, but the pop is there all day with this.
Yeah.
You know, you take a short swing, balls will come flying off very quickly. Good spin on this one, just like all the others. But I think this is my favorite too, because it is a little more controllable, a wider sweet spot. I should say a lot more controllable because the sweet spot is noticeably larger on this one, which was an issue with all three of the other more narrow paddles. I still feel like with that width, I'm used to playing with Gen 2s of the same width, having a wider sweet spot, and it's just a little bit smaller on this one than I would have liked and that I'm used to with the foam perimeter. So just adding foam, I think, would really complement all of these paddles for sure.
I think you can go a long way with any of these, but this one's my favorite because of kind of what you said in terms of the consistency of ball striking with this paddle.
Yeah. This is going to happen with any shorter paddle, but you're losing some length, and it matters. You know, you're used to being able to reach out with the ball if you have an elongated or even a hybrid paddle and have an extra half an inch of length. And I shanked a couple of balls. You do compensate for that. Your body gets used to it, and you're able to, you know, you're not going to miss that many more balls with a shorter paddle. And I think the trade-off with the width and the wider sweet spot is a way better trade-off than the length you get with elongated paddles, in my opinion. I'm migrating from, I used to play with the hyper elongated Apes Proline Energy, went to elongated from there. Now I'm at hybrid. I was at standard shape with the Collin Johns Gen-3. Now I went back up to hybrid, but who knows? I may find myself back in the standard 2 wide body category soon.
I'm more or less solidly in the wide body camp at this point. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're going to have that length paddle, why not give yourself a little wiggle room with a wide body.
Yeah, for sure. So one last thing about the Tempest Wave Pro. High pop on this paddle, it still wasn't the easiest to control at the kitchen. And the pop-ups were there. Like I said, you can get used to it, but that's just an issue with, it's a trade-off. Like you want offensive options at the kitchen, you need high pop. Mm-hmm. You're going to pop up more balls, and it's not going to be a resetting machine like something. It's more plush and doesn't have, so choose your poison. Pop or control, you can't have both for the most part. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
All right, one more paddle I wanted to discuss today. So JOOLA released for pre-order a couple weeks ago their new Pro Edition, the mod TA-15, which was the originally approved by the USAP alpha version of their Gen 3 paddles, which have since been delisted, but that original version, which was a prototype, so this is their internal naming system, the mod TA-15, is now available for purchase. So JOOLA is now selling these, and I just got mine in.
You done purchased one
yesterday, and
it's behind you.
It is here. It is not a fancy design on here at all, but I like it. It's one of those things where I remember when the Perseus prototype came out early last year, I saw Ben Johns playing with it, and it was very subdued, just a black face, and I think it was gray trim and a gray handle. And I got used to seeing that. And then when the regular Perseus came out, it had more designs. It had the big triangle on it. I was like, I want to play with that. I like that prototype. I think this is going to appeal to a lot of people in terms of the aesthetics. It doesn't have the gradient edge guard, and it's just plain white, but it's kind of sharp looking.
I never liked the colors of the JOOLAs.
Right. It is. I mean,
The
they are
Gen-3s.
kind of loud, right?
Yes.
And some people loved it, other people not so much. But I think there will be an audience for the more subdued look of this. So the question is this any different at all from the Gen 3s that were released and then delisted? And there was some talk, on Discord and all this about, looking at the court documents on the court case between the USAP and JOOLA right now, the center of the delisting was based on the administrative error by JOOLA of submitting the wrong selection of the paddles for the similarity testing. Mm-hmm. So basically, they got the mod TA-15 approved earlier last year, sometime in the latter half of 2023, then sent in all of the real production models, but there was a slight difference in those than this. And JOOLA stated that it was variation in the width of the foam perimeter that they stuck, which is the propulsion core, right? So there's edge foam all the way around, and there's like a half an inch of
Right.
more squishy foam that goes just around the top and the sides of the paddle. And they said that the ones they submitted accidentally some of them had slightly thicker foam in those areas. So the speculation was, okay, this one they're releasing now is going to be a more subdued, calm version of the ones that were, sent out to the public and then delisted. My impression, so I played some games with it yesterday, I played some games and drilled with it this morning, is that it plays exactly the same as the Perseus Gen 3. Yeah. You can feel the surface is a bit toned down. It does not have the stick on your shirt kind of texture.
Down, right.
Yeah. However, it gets really good spin, top tier spin. It got close to 2,300 RPM, just over 2,200 RPM when I tested it today. Can you hear some rattle?
A little rattle.
Is it? Okay. It's probably the glue in the foam. Mm-hmm. Glue in the core, I mean. So spins good, right around 2,200 RPM. Not the crazy 2,487 RPM that I got for one of the Gen 3 Perseuses. Right. But the texture is consistent on both sides. It seems to be higher quality. Remember one of my paddles I got, the Gen 3s had wicked grit on one side and really smooth on the other, and they averaged out to like 2,200 or something. This one, more consistent. Really good top tier spin. Power's there, pop's there. So I did run the metrics on this. I set up my radar gun. Power on this mod TA-15 is at the 96th percentile on my database, same as the Perseus 3. I mean, within 0.1 miles per hour of each other, really close. Pop was the 95th percentile, so just two below the 97th percentile of the production model, which that's not a big difference. Nothing I really noticed on the court. Firepower of this, the combined metric of power and pop, 95 versus 96 for the Perseus 16. Now, I paid for this myself. They said they will eventually send us some, but I wanted to get the news out. I didn't want to spend $600 and get the 16 millimeter and the 14 millimeter. So I think Chris Olsen did, so he'll have some news on the 14 millimeter. I assume that the 14 millimeter will play like the 16 millimeter compared to the Gen 3s, that being almost exactly the same as the Gen 3s. So again, I did not notice only a subtle difference in pop, slightly subdued pop, but just where numbers are concerned and not where playtesting is concerned. I did not feel any difference. It felt just like a Gen 3.
Do you think you'll see any changes over time?
I don't know. And
we certainly saw that with the Gen 3s.
Right. I will eventually cut this open like a sandwich like I did. So I have a Perseus out there that was cut open for my review. And it would be nice to actually measure that layer of foam and see if it is any smaller. If it is smaller, it's not changing the performance of the paddle at all.
And maybe that's likely to lead to less break-in.
Maybe. That's a good point. That was one caveat I was going to bring up with this is with all of the news of the delisting, it kind of overshadowed the fact that these things were having an issue with core corruption before they were delisted. And that transition zone between the polypropylene and the foam was crushing.
Right.
Presumably because of that trampoline effect. And that interface between the foam and the polypropylene was breaking down.
Well, I'm going to hold out for a little while before I fork any money over.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I shouldn't comment. I shouldn't speculate on whether or not this one's going to be delisted again. I think it would be foolish on USAP's part to delist these if there's no violation of that similarity clause. If these are in fact exactly the same as what was originally approved by USAP. Other play impressions. Yeah, besides hitting just as hard, I should have brought out the Gen 3 Perseus. I remembered it having a wider sweet spot.
I was just going to ask you about any difference there.
Yeah, I was having some issues with twisting on this, and just the sweet spot didn't feel exceptional.
Yeah.
It was okay.
It wasn't on the Gen 3 either to me.
No, I mean I remember the Gen 3s all having really good sweet spots, right? Like well above average sweet spots. And this one, again, this is based on a few games, maybe 2 hours total playtime with this, but it just didn't have that same, oh, this is nice feel. Yeah. There was some twisting. I did put lead tape going up to about, a third of the way up the side, all the way down to the grip. And that did help quite a bit. And it's a stock, pretty light weight paddle. It's just under 8 ounces. I think this one was. Oh, no, right at 8 ounces. Just the same as the Perseus Gen 3. Swing weight's pretty low on this. I think it was like 119. For an elongated, I guess it's just under average. So there's room to add some perimeter weighting, and if you're adding it close to and below the balance point, then
you have twist weight numbers on that?
You're not going to feel it. Yeah, it was 6.1, I think.
Okay.
So same as the Perseus Gen 3. But it does need a little bit of showing up. In my opinion, it just stock, it didn't have the greatest sweet spot. Definitely would benefit from slice cap, as I feel that most elongated and even hybrid paddles would, to lower that balance point and get to shore up some of the weight issues, make it have a little bit more plow through. But overall, if you loved the Perseus Gen 3, 16 millimeter or 14 millimeter, and you really miss it, then I think this is a valid option to replace it. Same price. It comes with the aluminum or faux aluminum, I think, butt cap. It has the chip in it, the scannable chip, if you like that. So basically, I would say exactly the same as the Perseus Gen 3.
Well, that model in particular was not my favorite of the Gen 3 model, so I will sit tight.
And I've had some questions from viewers asking, okay, now that they've released the Perseus, are they going to release the Scorpius?
That would be nice.
but they are not because this was the only shape that was approved by USAP before the whole debacle of the similarity testing with all the other shapes. Right. So, unfortunately,
I thought there were other alphas out there.
there are other alphas, but those came out after this was
Okay,
approved.
I see.
This was the only shape that was USAP
That makes
approved.
sense. Okay.
Yeah. I will say though, if you loved the Collin Johns Gen-3 and a bright, the Scorpius
Yeah,
shapes,
which
there
I
is a
did.
paddle out there that's coming at the end of August. I can't say from whom, that plays really, really similar to that one.
John, you
I'm very
tease.
excited. I'm very excited about it.
You tease.
Because I was maining the Collin Johns.
Why do you do that?
I will look at the power. I ran the power and pop statistics. I haven't crunched those numbers yet, but in my opinion, it's slightly more subdued, ever so slightly, but still a lot of power, a lot of pop. Not as crazy spin as the
Okay.
Gen 3s, but I think that level of spin we're not going to see anymore on approved paddles.
I think if we could have a Collin Johns and a bright baby, that would be the paddle to have.
Collin Johns and a bright baby. Yes. All right, Eddie, shall we move on?
Let's deep dive.
Let's do a deep dive. So the hand speed index, the long-awaited hand speed
Yes.
index. Most people have probably forgotten all about this,
Not your fans.
but I am releasing it this week, or I should say, Brian Fitzpatrick from Graffiti and I are releasing it. So there will be a calculator on the Graffiti website where, if you know your paddle's static weight and your paddle's balance point and your paddle's swing weight, you can enter those three values and it will give you the energy in watts required to flip your paddle from here to here, 180 degrees from forehand to backhand or vice
All right.
versa, right? Now, one of the things that kind of tripped us up on this, so Brian figured this out. The calculations are valid. He's actually going to publish a blog post tomorrow also, giving all of the peeking under the hood of his formula. So he's giving the formula to everybody if people want to proof it. But he's been thinking about this for a while. It's completely valid. What I'm going to do with that value, those watts, so I'm going to put it into my paddle database and attach percentiles to it. So you'll know, like, what are the watts? So a paddle that has an 8-ounce static weight with a 24.0 balance point and a 115 swing weight, which is kind of, your average paddle. The hand speed index for that, for one particular type of movement, I'll get to that in a second, is 163.7. Now, that number is not going to mean anything because you have nothing to compare it to. Right? That's the number of watts required to make this movement with those weights on the paddle. But when you look at it on my database with over 200 paddles and I attach percentiles to it, then you can say, okay, that's 56 percentile or whatever. That's kind of, your average hand speed index versus 100th percentile. So this is going to be like the higher it goes, the slower in your hands it's going to feel. Do you know what I mean? Right. So the higher numbers are going to be slower paddles. So if you're looking for wicked hand speed, drop down to the single digits, right, on the percentiles. Now, the thing that slowed this down originally was in his calculation there are a series of assumptions. And one of those assumptions is how far your hand moves from point A to point B. So if I take this paddle and let's look at the center of my hand here, if I'm making a wrist dominant movement like this, my hand's actually not traveling anywhere. The center of my hand stays at 0, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the calculations. So wrist dominant movement, in other words, the whip that we all know. So things like, your attacks at the kitchen or even on drives when you follow through with the whip, that's going to play into that. So that's one of them. We also have an elbow dominant swing. So this one, your hand is actually moving considerably from point A to point B. If you're pivoting on your elbow, and this is the second one, elbow dominant swing, and the third one, try not to slap you in the face here, is shoulder dominant swing. So the Jesse Irvine, smash with the ball. These three are very, very different values. So it's what's really interesting, and I mentioned this on, I think it was our last podcast 2 weeks ago, is that my hunch was that this movement dropping the balance point on this short whippy movement will increase your ability to move the paddle more quickly. So increase the hand speed index, or lower it technically, but increase the speed of the paddle. So putting a slice cap on, for example, on the base of the handle will improve this movement. Questionable on this movement, and definitely decrease your hand speed on a shoulder dominant movement. And another thing that slowed us down is all of this playing around with slice caps is something I've been running into this calculator, putting it into the formula and seeing how the same paddle performed stock versus when the balance point drops. So that did materialize, my hunch that your hand speed increases with this movement, but decreases slightly with this movement and decreases more with this movement, because you're basically taking static weight plays a bigger role on these larger movements.
Sure.
So you're taking a heavier paddle and moving it with your shoulder across your body. No matter where the balance point is, it doesn't matter. You're just moving more weight at that point. So it's going to slow you down slightly, a few milliseconds, right? Versus this, where it almost evens out. And what I've been testing on this movement, it doesn't really make a difference in terms of adding that slice cap, a full ounce to the base of the handle. And on this, it increases your whip considerably. So now we know that this goes back to the original question, what does balance point have to do in pickleball with anything? Does it make a difference? Well, it does, in particular circumstances with particular movements.
For whip.
For whip.
Right.
Yes.
So the index is what? Is all of those combined, or is it just that?
You have 3 different indices at this point.
Okay.
So you have wrist dominant movements, elbow dominant movements, and shoulder dominant movements. And it's going to vary based on the balance point on a paddle, other things being equal. If you can, you can't lower the balance point without adding weight, basically, right? When you're adding weight to a paddle, it's going to affect this movement. You're going to move more slowly with the shoulder, about the same with the elbow. But with the wrist dominant movements, lowering that balance point and adding weight up to a certain point, we haven't realized that threshold yet. What's too much weight on the base of the cab where it actually slows down this movement? But again, it's a trade-off, because you're not going to get as quick of movement with this or with this when you're adding static weight to a paddle. But I think it's exciting to me, because I'm a huge nerd about paddle metrics. But there are going to be 3 more metrics on my paddle database. So yeah, and you can go calculate this yourself. And by the way, if you don't have a swing weight machine, you can find swing of your paddle on mine or Chris's or Braden's databases. If you don't have there's a little attachment that Graffiti makes, which measures the balance point. That's the easiest thing to measure yourself. You find where the paddle balances on your finger, and then you take that, mark it with a piece of chalk, or just hold your finger there, and then measure up from the bottom of the handle to that point and get that in centimeters. And you can enter that straight into the calculator on graffiti.com.
Yeah.
And
I like a
hand speed
sharp
index.
edge table, because the finger's got kind of it's a little too rounded.
Yes.
Right. So.
Sharp edge table. And also, I forgot to mention that Slice, the folks that make the speed caps, they also make a little balance device for your paddle. So it's like this kind of heavy triangular thing with a linear rubber stopper on top, and that sits on your paddle.
Yep.
And it's really easy to find your balance point that way. Actually, that's an easier way in your finger too, instead of just using the tip of your finger, use it sideways. But that's a really, I don't know if I'd pay I don't know how much it costs, maybe $10-20, but if you want, you can get one of those to make it simpler.
So what about the effect of that balance point on people's varying grip placement? Like for me, I tend to hold a paddle like down here.
Way down low, right.
And while others may actually hold it up here.
Yep.
So I would think that balance point would have a much larger effect if I tend to hold the paddle up here versus I'm not really getting much from adding anything down here with a grip that's exaggerated towards the end of that handle, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm going to defer to Brian on this and ask him. My hunch is that it will make a difference equally for a high grip versus a low grip relative to that grip. Meaning that if you have a high grip, like Callum Dawson, like the ping pong grip.
Tyler Loon.
Tyler, does he have a high grip too?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're automatically getting better hand speed with that.
Right.
Because your fulcrum, as your hand, is raised on that, and it's closer to the balance point, and it's essentially the same as lowering the balance point, right? But you're raising your hand, so you're getting less distance between the fulcrum and the balance point, making it a whippier movement. You're also losing a lot of power, by the way, on holding your paddle like that, because you don't get the same level of leverage. You don't get the same leverage with the paddle. Anyway, but if you're holding it way down at the base of the handle, it's still going to improve. It's not going to be as fast as holding it up here, but the relative improvement between the stock balance point and the lower balance point after adding the slice cap is going to improve it. I could be wrong. That's my guess. Like I said, I'll defer to Brian. Maybe he can answer your question more accurately than me. Yeah, good one though.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about is that, most of us don't use just one of those examples that you described in any particular swing. It's a whole chain of things. That starts at the shoulder, moves down to the elbow, and then finishes with a whip. So,
exactly.
How do you suggest people interpret those three numbers when there's a whole system of structural and kinesthetic parts in force? That's
a really good question. I meant to get into that, so thank you for reminding me. So, if you don't have a lot of videotape of yourself playing to know what your strokes look like, then I highly recommend doing that, not just for this, but it also helps you see things that you're doing wrong that you wouldn't know otherwise. But also, if you have video of yourself, watch your strokes, watch your serve, watch your ground strokes, watch your kitchen game, and see where those pivot points interact with each other. A lot of people have just mostly a straight arm, and that's actually recommended for consistency. For dinks, pivoting at the shoulder and keeping your elbow and your wrist locked. Other people are able to utilize a wristier movement. Jack Sock's forehand, for example, he's got that wicked forehand. He's able to generate a ton of velocity, even with the Lux that he was playing with before, because of his form. So if if you see that your most of your kinetic chain is hinging on the shoulder, and you have a whip through at the end, then you can look at those two metrics, those two indices on the graffiti calculator, the hand speed index calculator, and see, play around with lowering the balance point. Hypothetically, you don't have to actually do it on your paddle, but you can lower that balance point until you see an improvement in the whip, and you're having to add weight, static weight also. So, consider that as well. Add some static weight in there and find that nice balance point between, okay, it's not going to be too slow on the shoulder movement. It's not going to slow me down too much, but it is going to increase that whip. And part of adding weight to your paddle is that it has more plow through and more power, even adding it to the base of the handle. So you're going to get added benefits with increased ball velocity as well. So that'd be one way to play with it.
All right, good response.
Yes. Okay, we are running late on this. This is going to be a long podcast. All right, we got
a question or two.
We do have some music questions.
Here's one from Jimmy Sampson on the Gearbox Ultimate review that you just released. Was it last week? How did the dwell time or control compare to the JOOLA Gen-3s?
Good question. So on the Gearbox Ultimate, I do feel more dwell time than most other paddles, especially like the stiffer Gen 2 paddles, the thermoform paddles. Compared to the JOOLA Gen-3s, I'd say they're pretty similar, bordering on the Gearbox having more dwell time.
I would agree.
More consistent dwell time across the face of the paddle, outside of the edges of the paddle. And if you hit it in the center, along that longer strip in the center, then it's going to feel like it's cupping the ball and throwing it back. I think I've used this demonstration before. That's what the Gearbox Pro Ultimate feels like, and the Pro Power before that. I'd say that the Ultimate does have more dwell time than the Pro Power.
I would agree with that, and I would agree with that it feels more than the Gen 3s.
Okay.
Frankly, more than any other paddle I think I've played with recently.
Yeah, it feels good when you hit it in the center.
It's the most, as far as my memory can dig up, the most tennis feeling of any pickleball paddle that I've played with.
Yeah, so if you hit the Gearbox anywhere around here, it's going to give you that dwell time effect versus the Gen 3s or this new mod TA-15, where you get less dwell time down here and a lot of dwell time right there at that interface between the foam
Yeah.
and the polypropylene core. So I've made the comparison before to a diving board on this. There's more of a diving board effect on the JOOLA Gen-3s where the ball hits it and it springs like that. Where the closer you get to the end of the diving board, the more response you get versus the Gearbox, which is more kind of
Consistent throughout the face.
more trampoline-y.
Are we allowed to use that word?
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, another question.
Okay, Mr. Universe is in the market for a new paddle and went through your database and averaged your control and firepower metrics together to see what, in this person's opinion, was hypothetically the best paddle. So taking those two numbers together. Pretty shocked to see that the new PaddleTek Tempest Wave Pro C was maybe the second paddle on the list. I think it's interesting that the PaddleTek is marketing this paddle as having a layer of glass epoxy under this carbon fiber surface, which may contribute to these high metrics. There's no noise, I guess by meaning noise being conversation about
Right.
this paddle. What are your thoughts on that averaging of those metrics to come up with a best paddle? And what about the Pro C as an example, as to sort of be an example of that metric?
Right. So, again, my firepower metric is a combination of power and pop, basically an average of those two. And my control metric is looking at a few other attributes, and it's very much in its beta form. There are a few paddles in there that I'm like, this doesn't seem right. You know, a really high control score on this or a really low control score on this. But it's the best we have right now. And it's interesting that this person looked at an average of the firepower and a control score as kind of like, okay, can you maximize both of these? Is it just a spectrum where you either have a control paddle or a power paddle?
Yep.
Or can you maximize both? And he brought up a good point. He or she, Mr. Universe, he brought up a good point that the Tempest Wave Pro C is high on both of these, high on the control score and high on the firepower score. So does this translate? I thought it was a good question for this week because we actually played with this paddle. So do you think this is a paddle that exemplifies the perfect combination of maximized firepower and control?
No. It's a very good paddle, don't get me wrong, but I would not call this the best paddle.
Right.
And so there is more than these two metrics in average, or any metric, frankly, that's going to define the best paddle.
Oh, I just remembered all my variables. So for the control metric, it is the combination of spin, twist weight, which approximates the sweet spot,
Yeah.
and then subtracting pop from that.
Okay.
And I'm tweaking those variables to find the right one because right now I'm contributing spin and twist weight contribute equally and raising that score, and then I'm taking like 20% of the pop percentile and subtracting that. So I'm still tweaking those. So this is a good example of, to me, yes, it doesn't meet its control score that I have on my database. The control score is too high for this paddle because it is so poppy. So what I might do is go back and increase the percentage of pop that I subtract from that score. Because I found that this paddle, yes, it gets really good pop and there's really good offensive options at the kitchen, but you can't just dink with it all day and reset with it without popping some balls up as a result of that increased pop, right? You're going to pop up balls with more pop. It's just matter of fact, right?
Yeah.
And yes, there's really good spin on this, which helps with the control, but not enough to offset the poppiness of the paddle.
I would think also that since pop plays a factor in your control metric, that weighing that against your firepower metric, there's a problem there because you have pop in both sides sort of fighting against each other.
True. That's very true. Again, it's very much in its beta form. I will definitely change it. And even the firepower, if we find a valid way to measure exit velocity, I'll use that instead of firepower. But I'm just having fun with these and trying to come up with some things that'll be useful for people at a glance to be like, okay, this is a very powerful or a very control-oriented paddle. Like I said, control score, very beta right now. And I'm still tweaking with it. But really good question. I think it gets to the heart of one of the issues of why the control is still in its beta form, and some tweaks I can make to the formula to make it much better. And I think subtracting more pop from the equation is necessary to get it to more accurately reflect what the control of the paddle is. But
enough.
That's not to take anything away from the Wave Pro Tempest, because I think it is a good paddle.
It is.
I think it does strike a good balance for somebody who wants to be offensive at the kitchen but still have enough control. You know what I mean? So it's very poppy for offensive options at the kitchen.
And has the feel to control that pop.
It has the feel. It has the nice twist weight, good spin. So all the things are there. It's just you can't get away from the fact that you are, in certain regards, on a spectrum between control and power.
Great answer. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Eddie. All right.
Any final words?
We are at the end of
we've
our
used
show
all the
notes. All the words are gone.
Yes.
Yeah. Any plans coming up for next week?
No,
Okay.
I got nothing.
Yeah. We are doing another podcast next week. We're back on our weekly schedule. We've been a bit sporadic lately. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there.
And I think we may have some news to share next week.
We got more news, more exciting news. A little
so
teaser.
stay
Well
tuned.
done. Well done, Eddie.
All right.
All right. See you next time.
Thank you, sir. Take care.